So let me explain. Ever since Godmaster released as the final content pack for Hollow Knight in August, we've been waiting for Team Cherry to give us more info on the mysterious Hornet DLC. And the info they gave was that the Hornet DLC won't be happening. We're getting a whole Hornet sequel instead! This is Silksong, Hornet's standalone adventure in a new kingdom. The trailer dropped just as Valentine's Day, and I'm here to pick apart and analyze these mere 2 minutes of footage to discuss possible game mechanics, lore, and of course some speculation. Alright, enough of that. Let's get into this. The trailer opens with Hornet being transported in a cage to the setting of the game. We know it's a cage because the cinematic ends with Hornet breaking free using her thread. Also, the bugs escorting Hornet are seen later in the trailer as enemies. Not to mention the website flat out states that Hornet was imprisoned. So Hornet was captured and is being brought somewhere. We've yet to know why. I speculate that it's to meet the queen of this land. It may also have something to do with Hornet being the princess of Hallownest, as the daughter of the now deceased Pale King. In the cinematic, we can make out the howling cliffs given the wind, thus confirming that we're not in Hallownest anymore. Next we see gameplay. In the top left we see masks and soul, just like there was in the previous game. In the various clips it shows as little as 5 masks and as many as 7. The first mossy area shows 7 masks, meaning that this is a later game area. You also may have noticed the magic bar, which seems to be the alternative to the soul mechanic in Hollow Knight, only the design is different. Above the bar appears to be what I think is a reserve tank, just like in Hollow Knight. We never see the tank refill the bar, but whenever the bar isn't full, the tank is empty. And when the bar is full, the tank is full too. And later we see Hornet pull off an attack that empties the reserve tank and also takes a bit of the bar. I think they changed the design because Hornet's soul usage is going to be much more fluid and diverse, with some spells taking a lot of soul and others taking little, as opposed to Hollow Knight where every spell uses the same amount of soul. Now I kept calling it soul just now, however it's unlikely that this is even soul at all. If you look closely at the bar, you'll notice that it has a very thread-like design, meaning that this is more likely to be silk, not the white liquidy goop we're all familiar with. But just like soul, the meter gets filled up when you attack enemies. But soul is the stuff that animates life, which is why you get soul for killing bugs. So if killing bugs gives us silk, then does that mean that the silk that Hornet uses is actually made of soul? That would explain why the Weavers were able to make spells with this stuff. But even though Hornet's silk may be made of soul, she doesn't appear to be simply using magic spells like the Knight did. Also, throughout the trailer, we see Hornet with a varying amount of masks, but not additional silk reserve tanks, which means this may be all the silk we get to work with until we learn more. Once the gameplay begins, we see a mossy area, a graveyard, a coral area with tiny fish bugs swimming through the air, and a gilded city where we see our first enemy, which appears to be a flying warrior with a face similar to the bugs that were carrying Hornet in the cinematic. I suspect this place is Silksong's version of the City of Tears, and these are its flying sentries. The next area appears to be, to my surprise, the Forest of Bones, which is an area intended for Hollow Knight 1 but was cut for time. We see a bell that's likely just a piece of destructible architecture to fill the area with, and we also see our second enemy, which appears to be a black beetle that wears another bug's shell on its back as armor. When Hornet approaches this enemy, she seems to be running, which could hint at a potential run button. When she attacks during this run, she appears to do a dash attack and then a down attack, which makes her lunge downward instead of a simple slash like the Knight could do. These two moves appear to be based on attacks Hornet pulled off during her boss fights. After pulling off the down jab, she appears to do a kind of air dash next. Then she lands and does a spinny jump, which I think is just her jumping animation while running. In the next scene, we see a steel bug. This bug is actually not a normal enemy because, around Christmas, Team Cherry posted a blog post where they revealed Steel Assassin Sharp, or Sharpay, I don't know. And alongside Sharp, they showed silhouettes for his 2 buddies, one of which matches this steel bug perfectly, so I think it's safe to assume that this is a boss and not an enemy. The fight will probably take place after Hornet gets the wall jump, and the fight will teach us how to use it properly by having us scale walls to reach the steel bug. Meanwhile, it shoots lasers at us. Next, we see Hornet use her needle to hit bugs from a distance, and also gets grappled toward them before being knocked back. Then she uses the nail to grapple to a point that isn't an enemy, so it'll be used for platforming as well as combat. The next scene shows us an enemy that clings to the ceiling and tries to spit its juices at us as we try to hide for cover or outrun it. It seems that this enemy alternates between spitting and covering its mouth, so that must be when you're supposed to make a run for it. The next enemy has some really large scissors. Also, above him, we see some bugs that appear to be enemies as well. One appears to be holding a lantern and the other is holding a pin. what even is that? By the way, when Hornet hits enemies, they seem to glow white, which means that the radiance is completely absent from the game because infected bugs would spew infection with each hit. This could probably be because the game takes place beyond Hallownest, but more likely is that the game takes place after the Radiance was defeated and was either swallowed by the Void or mauled. Speaking of the ending of Hollow Knight, the ending that you get for defeating the Radiance in Godhome, where Hornet is confronted, likely by the Hollow Knight, isn't given any closure in this trailer. With this game taking place in the New Kingdom, it seems unlikely that we'll be facing the Void, and the most I've got for the Hollow Knight is that the battle with it made us weak enough to get captured. Back to the trailer. Next we see a very brief scene that shows a couple of enemies wearing bells on their heads, an ability that could either be in the Gilded City or the Forest of Bones. I'm leaning toward the former. The flying one tosses a projectile Hornet's way, and Hornet appears to be attempting to backstep. This is interesting because backstepping was a mechanic that was cut from the original game, so they must be bringing it back seeing how Hornet's gameplay features her acrobatics substantially. Also, the animation Hornet has when backstepping looks a lot like Grimm's backstepping animation, where he crawls backwards on all fours. We're back at the mossy area again with a bunch of rather harmless looking enemies. They remind me of bagworms. We also see a flying bug and a crawling bug. Then Hornet kills the bugs with the flying nail attack she uses in her boss fights. This attack also uses a lot of silk. The bugs drop these red balls which Hornet picks up and are apparently called rosaries. This might be a currency, it could be used for crafting. It's unknown what they'll be used for because unlike Hollow Knight, there's no geo counter, so Silksong may not use a conventional money system. Then there's a large enemy with a triple-bladed bone scythe, and a flying enemy that lunges down in an attempt at a surprise attack. If you'll notice, the platforms in the background and foreground are made of bones as well. The Forest of Bones is likely one of the earliest areas in the game because Hornet is shown to have only 5 masks while in the area, and because William Pellin and Arnie Gibson said that while Hollow Knight was about descending into the depths, Silksong is about ascending to the peak, and since the Forest of Bones has lava in it, it would be a safe bet that it's not going to be at the top of the world. The next enemy is seen rapidly chasing Hornet. It also has the same face as the prison guards and the Gilded Sentry. It's also attacking us with scissors and not a nail. I believe the repeated use of scissors seems to be related to the significance of silk in this game. I wonder if we'll see more sewing references like this. The first boss we see looks like a worm, but not a worm, just a worm. Though it looks big, it is clearly a worm and not a worm because it's too small to be a worm. This appears to be the first boss in the game as indicated by the amount of masks Hornet has, and the arena to the fight appears to be walled off using silk. Perhaps this is where the Weavers fled to after abandoning Deepnest? The next boss looks like a cross between the Collector, Grimm, and the Radiance. The fluff around him and the antenna indicate that he may be a moth, but his color scheme and the red smoke might mean that he was once part of Grimm's troop. Also, his antennae are shaped into a heart, which is cute. The next boss is a mossy fly boss, which Hornet uses her nail flurry attack on, which is, again, an attack that she had in her boss fights. And as the boss is damaged, it looks to be shooting goop out from under it, which means that this fight will be all about hitting the boss in ways other than from directly below. The next boss looks to be the boss of the coral area. He has 4 eyes, a scar, which probably means something, and appears to be a warrior with armor. He then does an attack that summons coral spikes, which will probably be his main attack during the fight. This next boss is very interesting. First of all, the battlefield is made up of flowers. There are silk threads in the background, and there is an elevator in the background as well, which probably means that we'll have to beat this boss to activate it. These flowers could be related to the delicate flower, but these look closer to roses, while the delicate flower seems closer to a daisy. Now, the boss itself. She appears to be Hornet's rival in the game, because later in the trailer, we see her fighting Hornet again in the Forest of Bones. Also, on the Silksong website, we see her alongside Hornet, which can only mean that she's going to be a really major player in the story. The next boss looks like an ant and takes place in a coliseum in the Forest of Bones with several other ants watching the fight. This is interesting since the devs said that ants were planned for the area before it was cut. Next is a giant 4-armed boss, which I think may be the required boss for the area, and it seems it'll use its arms to break apart the platform. God, this is so freaking awesome. Now we're on to the new NPCs. This character looks like she's either greeting or challenging us. This guy appears to be opening a door for us in the Forest of Bones. Not sure how he's doing it though. Maybe there's someone near the lever that he's giving the signal to. Next we meet a hermit, and Hornet appears to be doing something with her nail. I thought she was just showing it off, but if you look closely, it seems that there are actually strings on the nail, and that Hornet might be playing a song for the hermit. Quite literally, a silk song. Next we see Hornet riding the first boss from earlier, which leads me to believe that after we defeat it, we befriend it and it becomes this game's version of the Stagways. Then we see something really interesting. Hornet hits an enemy, then spends all of her silk to instantly heal 3 masks in mid-air. Imagine pulling this off during a fight. This can only mean that boss fights will be really fast-paced if you can heal this quick. We see a new town that has a bench with particle effects, implying that we can sit there, so the bench mechanic is returning, which could also mean the return of equipping only at benches and charting maps on benches. We meet an NPC who has a shell made of dung in a rather small town. He has a cane, so I'll bet he's the village elder who would tell us about the place. This place may be to the Gilded City what the Royal Waterways were to the City of Tears, given the water and the dung. This next town appears to be in the Gilded City, and could be the main town in the game. There's a guy outside, likely advertising his shop. There's what looks like a guard on duty who flies off after a bit, and to the left of him looks to me like some sort of banker. I'm also seeing a recurring theme of bells. The shop guy wears a bell, there are bells on the floor and in the background, a bell is rung near the end of the trailer, and this symbol, likely representing the bell, keeps appearing. It's clear to me that this kingdom is still alive and thriving, a stark contrast to Hallownest, which had already fallen by the time the game started. Next we see a village in a mossy area, which gets attacked by a large enemy. There may be a side quest where we slay this bug and gain a reward from the village. Next we see a mossy bug brewing some kind of potion in a cauldron. This clip appears along with the text, "New quests," so we may be either delivering potions for this guy, bringing him ingredients, or he'll have some sort of character arc like the nailsmith. The next scene is really interesting. It appears to be detailing the requests of nearby bugs. There are 3 categories, it seems. Gather, Hunt, and Wayfarer. Gathering will likely have you tracking down and collecting items to give to bugs for a reward. Hunt will likely have you kill enemies for some bug. I'm lost on what Wayfarer means though. Maybe a bug got lost and needs us to guide them home. The item looks like a harp and the quest is called Haunted Gallery, which could hint at an area we haven't seen. This seems to me to be how Silksong will handle side quests. The next scene shows an old bug riding another bug charging into several enemies with his nail. I think this character is likely an example of a partner NPC who will help you fight enemies, but probably only during his respective side quest. The next character we meet is in the Forest of Bones and is likely this game's version of the Nailsmith, allowing us to upgrade our nail. He also seems to have an apprentice to the right. Both of them are wearing bells on their heads, like some of the enemies we've seen before. The small one appears to be shoveling coal into a furnace and will probably give us dialogue about who his master is. Next, we see a new enemy that spits poison that lingers on the floor. It's very clearly poison from the look of it. It could be interesting if getting hit by this attack gave you some sort of poison effect that whittled away at some of your masks. We also see Hornet clearly wall jump here. First we see the spike trap from her second boss fight, which she can lay down to either damage enemies or bounce off of for extra height. Then we see the equip menu, which is just filled with information. If you'll notice, Hornet is sitting on a bench to equip a new item. Above the weapons, there's probably a red icon which is off screen, but it's definitely there so we know which section is which. In the top row are what appear to be nails. The dagger travels straight forward. The tri-nail is the same but with 3 long nails, and the dish-like nail is likely a projectile fired directly upwards. These 3 seem like the earliest, most basic weapons you'll get. There's Hornet's spike trap, which we already saw. There are some summonable minions which hover around Hornet and will likely attack enemies. The next item bears a striking resemblance to the Mantis Claw. My best guess for how it could operate is as a sort of double boomerang, otherwise I'm not sure. The next weapon is the Pimpillo, which is an explosive projectile. Pretty simple. The description for it also states that it hurts friends and foes alike, which means that you may have multiple different companions throughout the game, and you'll have to use this item with caution. The next weapon is a saw blade of sorts, which cuts forward and travels along the ground. The last weapon looks like a pin with lifeblood on it that bestows Hornet with lifeblood masks when used, and interestingly, Hornet's masks are a different shape than the Knight's masks, but the lifeblood masks are identical to the Knight's masks, which might mean something. Then under the blue icon, there are 3 items. What looks to be like a mossy idol of some kind, a weaver symbol, and a little bug doll. These likely aren't weapons, but instead grant some kind of passive or defensive effect. There's more items under the yellow icon, but they're off screen and are more mysterious than the blue icon items. The crest to the left seems to show 3 slots. One is for weapons, but the other 2 are a mystery. It prominently shows the red, blue, and yellow slots that each item is under, which means that you can only have one type of item in a slot at a time. And in the bottom left corner it says, Change Crest, which could hint at how you might be able to set 3 different weapon loadouts that you could easily swap between during gameplay. And lastly, this isn't even the whole menu. There's a tab that indicates that we're on the tools section and there's another section called Inventory, which could hold things like power-ups and such. Now onto the demonstration of each weapon. They show Hornet summoning 4 minions, and just to the top right is that same kind of bug with the weird face that held us imprisoned. The daggers showcased next, and we see a smaller version of the shell bug we saw earlier. When showing off the lifeblood pin, we get to see some unique ant enemies. One with a helmet and spear, the other with dual knives. These dual knives also look an awful lot like the mantis claw type items that we saw before. This leads me to believe that this item will have something to do with the Forest of Bones. When the saw is showcased, we see more of those weird bugs, and now it seems to me like they're normal bugs just wearing tarps. One of them is holding a bell, which I'm now certain is a holy object. So could this mean we're fighting a cult? Next we see Hornet facing a new boss where she uses her counter to evade the boss's attack. This could possibly be the primary strategy for beating the boss. And the text New Legends could mean that this was once a proud warrior. The next scene shows Hornet swimming in water. Could be acid, but it doesn't look like it's boiling, so I'd say it's harmless water. Also, the path Hornet is going toward looks like it's made of bones, so this may be a secret path from the mossy area to the Forest of Bones. The next scene shows Hornet focusing her nail in front of a Weaver shrine, which I think confirms that the Weavers are in the kingdom, cause, I mean, like who else would have built it? Then we see Hornet ringing a giant bell, which is probably at the peak of the kingdom, and when the scene begins, the bell glows purple, which could mean that there is some sort of seal on it. We see Hornet fight the white flower bug one more time, and that's the end of the trailer. I might as well just end the video here.